Breathing. There is a saying in yoga that without the breath, there is no yoga. Certainly that reminds us that it's through breath training that we enter into a deeper aspect of our own lives and being. And there are many benefits in doing that. Working with the breath is a healing process. Working with the breath makes us more sensitive to our internal states of being. And working with the breath reminds us that there is something living miraculously in our own beings that can be touched and voluntarily managed through breath awareness. So we are in the process of learning something about how a yoga student orients themselves to breathing. In basic yoga breath work, it's important to divide breath work into two parts. One part we might call breath training. The second part we might call pranayama. These two aspects of breath work complement one another, but breath training serves as the foundation, and pranayama is the elaboration. So an important step for every yoga student is to get started by working with the mechanics of their own breath. How does a person breathe well? Now, of course, this can be a kind of nervous-making process. If I think that I'm going to go in and examine my breath and perhaps even make adjustments to it, I might become more and more nervous about the whole idea and just leave it up to nature and not interfere. But nature made the breath as a kind of doorway, and that doorway is something that we can enter. We can enter into our own selves through that breath awareness. How? The first step is simply to become aware of breathing. The breath flows out and it flows in. It's not necessary to be aware of your breathing in a critical way, but it is helpful to be aware of the breath in a way that allows you to access it as a means for working with yourself. And that means becoming aware of breathing. The two great streams of breath complement one another. The exhalation cleanses. The inhalation nourishes. And so these two breaths, one after the other, again and again, are constantly doing their work, cleansing and then nourishing, carrying away wastes and replenishing with fresh energy. I've sometimes thought about this, wondering if these two small breaths can really ever get the job done. One exhalation and one inhalation takes just a number of seconds. And yet we imagine that by breathing and becoming aware of the breath, we do something remarkably helpful to ourselves. There are a number of ways of thinking about it, but one simple way is thinking about the amount of time it takes to breathe. If you examine your breath, you'll find that you are breathing about 10 to 15 breaths in a minute. Those 10 or 15 breaths in a minute add up. By the end of the day, you've breathed 21,000 times. 21,000 breaths, each cleansing and nourishing, each emptying and filling. The first stage in working with the breath, then, is simply to feel these two great processes within you. And as you feel these two great breaths, they perform their function without you being required to do anything beyond that. Bringing awareness to breathing, however, does change it a bit. It changes it because whenever we're aware of something, we naturally begin to ask questions about it. What is good breathing? Am I breathing well? If I am breathing well or not so well, what can I do to change it? And if I improve the quality of my breathing, what benefits does it have? One of the first stages to discover breathing is to recognize that improving the quality of breathing improves the quality of life. And so, after we have begun to sense the breath and become aware of it, the next step is to learn just a little bit more about how to breathe. There is a muscle. That muscle, called the diaphragm, lies beneath the lungs. It's responsible for everyday breathing. And when the diaphragm, the muscle beneath the lung, contracts, it draws the thoracic cavity and the base of the lungs down. When the muscle relaxes, in turn, it's drawn back up by the elasticity of the lungs. And so the diaphragm contracts, the lungs fill. The diaphragm relaxes, the lungs empty. I can begin to feel that movement, and particularly in breath training, I'd like to do that in a reclining position, lying on the floor, either on your back or on your stomach, so that you can feel these deep movements of the diaphragm within your own body. After a certain period of training, you'll become used to the idea that when the diaphragm contracts and the lungs fill, the abdomen expands as well. Depending on your posture, and this is where breath training becomes a little bit more sophisticated, depending on your posture, you may also feel the expansion of your rib cage along the sides and even in the back. So, in the process of training your body to breathe, you are simply learning to recognize the signs of good breathing. And a good yoga teacher will help you recognize those signs without making for nervousness or discomfort, but rather simply the feeling of the flow of the breath again and again in an unbroken, relaxed stream. One more step. Of course, breath training takes time. And over that time, you'll have the opportunity to view your breath again and again. But one further step is helpful, and that further step is the idea that at the end of the inhalation, the exhalation begins. At the end of the exhalation, the inhalation begins. There's a relaxed, smooth connection from breath to breath. You'll begin to sense that you are really not the breather. What you began thinking about was true all along. Your body breathes. And as that breath flows out and in, it smoothly is woven from breath to breath. In the process, you'll discover that your mind relaxes. So breath training is a process that leads from simple awareness of the breath to a relaxed sense of the mechanics of breathing to a most remarkable thing, your mind relaxing and being the observer of your own relaxed nervous system. At that point, you're then ready for pranayama. Most of us have some idea of what that pranayama consists of. Breathing practices like nadi shodhanam, ujjayi breathing, sitali, sitkari, brahmari. These are all styles of breathing. Perhaps the two most commonly practiced are Bhastrika, the bellows breath, and nadi shodhanam, alternate nostril breathing. Each of these has their own place to play in meditation practice, in relaxation practices, in the cleansing practices that rejuvenate us and give us the sense that our lungs are clean and healthy, and most important, practices that lead us to a relaxed inner concentration. So, breath training, pranayama, these complement one another. One leads to the next until finally we go beyond the breath and discover that our journey was always about finding our self.